It's one of Germany's largest steel and machinery manufacturers. Salzgitter AG now says it had a rocky 2023, marked by higher borrowing and energy costs. Well, Gunnar Groebler is CEO of Salzgitter, and he joins me now for more. Gunnar, thank you for coming onto our show. 2023, your earnings before taxes, less than a fifth of what it was in 2022, rather. Your industry knows ups and downs. How bad was this year?
Well, actually, I think you have to see the year 2023 in the context of 2022. 2022 has been a record year for Salzgitter and for the entire steel industry in Germany due to the war of Russia against the Ukraine, which led to extreme prices on the steel side in 2022. 2023 is more of a normal year in the German and European steel context. We have started in the year fairly well. We've then seen sort of market deterioration in the second half of the year, not only the steel sector but more general. Hence the lower result. However, looking at it from a Salzgitter perspective, I think it shows that we have been able to navigate through that year with great resilience and robustness, and hence I acknowledge that the year 2023 comes out lower than 22. However, it has been a robust and a resilient year for us, and shows also good progress on our strategy, Salzgitter AG 2030, which is a strategy around decarbonization and circularity.
Some of those same impediments or hurdles that you faced in 2023 continue into this year, including higher energy costs, higher borrowing costs. How do you see this year coming out?
Well, you rightly point out at the start of 2024 being on the same level than we left 2023. However, first signals also that at least lead to a perhaps more positive outlook for the second half of this year. Energy prices have come down quite dramatically. So we are on the electricity side, on the gas side, we're now on the same level than we have been before the COVID crisis. And also electricity has come down substantially compared to 2023 and 2022. Hence, we see some developments there. However, still there's a regulatory need to discuss energy costs, especially for the energy-intensive industry in Europe, because compared to other regions globally, we're still on a high level. So certainly, this is something we need to further work on and further discuss. But the overall development through the year at least gives some reason to believe that the second half of this year could be stronger. Also on the interest rate, we're seeing the inflation coming down, so there might also be movement there.
Is it fair to say that energy costs are your biggest problem right now as a company?
Well, given that we're in a transformation and move away from the CO2-intensive steel making with coal to green electricity and green hydrogen, of course, the energy costs, especially on the electricity side, play an important role for us, an increasing role for us. Hence, also the very intensive debate with regulator, with policymakers, to find a level playing field vis-à-vis our global competitors. Yes.
You have a major green steel project in the works. You've referenced this several times, called Salzgitter. You received this past year significant funding from the German government. Does this current situation, when we look at energy prices, when we look at borrowing costs, does it make this project more necessary, or is it bound to face some of the same uncertainties?
Well, first of all, I think why do we do this? Because there's a global belief that a reduction of CO2 is necessary. So and the steel industry, being one of the large emitters of CO2, need to change. So, and that problem won't go away, or that problem won't go away, irrespective of what sort of the input parameters say. So what we need to do is to stay firm on our transition, and then discuss sort of the input parameters as electricity, as borrowing costs, etc., with the respective policymakers and regulatory bodies to find a way to ensure that in this phase of vulnerability in that transformation, the companies that should stay in Europe, and this is a political statement, not necessarily mine, but politically backed, that they also have a chance to compete on a global scale.
when you look at the U.S. and how they've tried to make climate-related manufacturing more attractive, and then you look at Europe, where you did receive a considerable amount of funding, but through a much lengthier process, I would imagine. How do you compare the two? Is it where it should be, or does more work need to be done in Europe?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Inflation Reduction Act is a strong tool in the U.S. to sort of boost the energy transition and hence also low CO2 industry. And in Europe, I would say on a total volume number in terms of euros is on the same level than the US, but the process is much more cumbersome, it's much more lengthy, and sort of a clear focus on reducing bureaucracy and a clear focus on supporting industry on a shorter term is necessary. And certainly with all the elections going on in Europe this year, there's at least hope that this will be in focus of policymakers to reduce bureaucracy and increase the speed of that transformation. And also increase the certainty that that this transformation will also be a success.
We know that another focus here in Europe is building armaments, building weapons and weapon systems that I would imagine require a lot of steel. Does that potentially feed into your steel manufacturing and produce more demand?
Well, certainly this is a new situation for us. Sort of steel for security purposes is back on the agenda. Hasn't been on the agenda for many years. It is back on the agenda. We are able to support the industry with this type of steel grades. As Salzgitter, we have a product for this. So yes, we're going to see an increase in demand here. In total volume, though, it's going to be minor. It's not that this will increase volumes to a large extent. If you look at the total scale of, for example, Salzgitter with production of 6 million tons of steel per year, this will remain a smaller fraction. But yes, this market is back on the agenda. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I have to say, but this is where we are.
There's been, over past decades, a lot of hand-wringing about steel and metals manufacturing in Europe and how competitive it is. We've seen recently that the Tata Group has removed or has announced that it's planning to remove 2 blast furnaces from the UK, which has spurred a discussion there about the ability to create virgin steel. That ability will be gone from the UK after those blast furnaces are removed. How important is that capability? How do you look at this discussion when you see these kinds of announcements?
Well, in my book and also talking to industry players and policymakers, I think there's a clear understanding that base industry should remain in Europe. And hence also the steel industry. And why is that? Because we are in the middle of the transformation. I think if we can show that transformation works in Europe, this is something we can export to other regions. That's one. Secondly, what we have seen over the last years is how important resilience in the logistical chain is, and how sort of how big distortions can actually be, smaller ones even on the logistical side, how big the impact is on the industry side. So having resilience in the supply chain is important to our customers. Hence, they appreciate us being close by. They appreciate us being an R&D partner in the same sort of cultural framework. So we see a clear ask from our customers to really be close by and have a close link to them, not only logistically, but also from, as I said, from an R&D and from a customer relationship perspective. So in my book, it is not only about sort of whether we can import steel from somewhere else. With the geopolitical developments that we've seen over the last years, that also becomes more challenging, and you add risk to your business profile, but also sort of with a clear focus and a clear ask from our customers. So for me, base industry, steel industry has a clear place in Europe.
At the same time, we've seen Salzgitter has diversified away from just traditional steel manufacturing. A bright spot this past year was your technology unit. It makes things like packaging, or at least machines that produce packaging, I believe, for beveraging in the food industry. This has become very important for you guys. Is that fair to say, this kind of diversification? You're not just providing steel for autos, for potentially for weapons, but also for consumer products in a way.
Yeah, right. We're very happy with the development of our technology unit, especially KHS, that delivers those packaging machinery for beverages. And we've seen sort of that they have been able to grow despite a weaker machinery market, especially outside Europe. Our whole concept of being more diversified and playing on different economical cycles played out very nicely in 23 and will also play out in 24 as KHS had a record order intake in 23, which we then which carries us through 24, so we should also expect a strong result from KHS also this year. So in this sense, our diversification has played out very nicely in 23 and will certainly also in 24.
I want to wrap up by asking you about what's coming in the future. We know that the suspension of U.S. steel tariffs is set to run out in March 2025. By that time, there could be President Donald Trump back in office. How concerned are you about that situation?
Well, I think we have a chance here between the US and Europe to further work on the Global Sustainable Steel Agreement, which shows that there are two regions that actually want to reduce the CO2 the footprint, and steel industry can play a major role in here. I'm a bit disappointed, I have to say, that those discussions have halted just prior to Christmas last year. I still put some hope into a continuation between those two regions this year and the years to come. And irrespective of which administration will be in office for the future, I believe that those two regions should play together and play along because they have the similar agenda when it comes to carbon neutrality and carbon reduction. And showing this kind of coordination and cooperation will certainly help both industries, the American industry, but also ours. So I would rather sort of strengthen the boundaries between those, or the connection between those two regions than further separate them.
And then finally, while we're on the topic of politics, I have to ask you, we've talked a lot about the price of energy, and there were German government efforts to lower that price through an industrial price. They ultimately failed, especially as there has been something of a budget crisis in the country. Do you have any thoughts when it comes to the German government's reluctance to take on debt and what that means for industries such as yours?
Well, I think what we certainly need to further discuss is the difference between sort of spending money here and now, consuming as in consumption, or investing. For us, the support that government has given, this 1 billion euro that we add another 1.3 billion euro private capital to, this 1 billion euro is an investment into future industry in Germany, into future jobs in Germany, into future tax payments in Germany. So I'd rather call this an investment into the future of this country than a subsidy or anything like this. And I think that's also the way government has to look at those support schemes that they have handed out, and they certainly will also in the future. It is an investment into the structural development of Germany, of Europe. Hence, I would be very much in favor of focusing on investments also as a country, because as I said, it is about jobs, it's about sort of social welfare, it's about taxes. Hence, it makes sense.
All right, Gunnar Groebler is CEO of Salzgitter. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.